Hey friends, how are you? This is Jenna from Musings from the Middle School. So I am here today to talk to you about race and equity in the classroom, specifically how you can be an anti-racist teacher. I've wanted to do a video like this for a long time, but I have never really felt like I was adequate enough to do the job. I always felt like, because I still feel like this is like such a journey that I am on, and I have so much more to learn, and I'm always afraid of saying the wrong thing, and so I don't want to do that and make anybody upset, make anybody mad. I'm cautious about this because I know that these can be, painful conversations. I know that there's a lot of emotion that gets wrapped up into these conversations, and I just never felt like I was adequately prepared to facilitate the conversation. However, I know that recent events have really upset a lot of you, and I have been, definitely trying to post a lot of helpful information on my social media. And I'm noticing that more and more of you are like sliding into my DMs every day and asking me questions about things that I know you're afraid to put publicly because you don't want to say the wrong thing either. You don't want to hurt anybody. You don't want to say the wrong thing. And so you say it privately to me, or you don't say it at all. And that's, something that we need to have these conversations, and we need to have them out in the open. And so I was like, you know what, forget it. Even though I'm not necessarily the best person to be doing this, I'm going to do it anyway, because I think these conversations are just so incredibly important. Teachers, we have to be talking about race in our classroom. Specifically, we need to be modeling for our kids what it means to be an anti-racist. We need to be talking about it as much as we can so everyone understands the importance of being anti-racist. We need to be doing this in school. It is really important. Several of you have reached out and have said, I don't feel like this is necessarily my job. I think this, kids learn this stuff at home. Yes, but it's still our job. It's still our job too. And just because kids might be getting sometimes a different message at home, that's why it's even all the more important to be talking this way in school. So I'm still not totally sure how I'm going to do these videos. I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk to you about. I've given a bunch of different professional developments on race and equity in the classroom and how to be an anti-racist teacher. But, that's always in a different sort of format. It's like professional development. There's activities that we do, things that we get up and do, like me just talking at you. I don't know how that's going to go. I don't want to be sitting here talking at you for an hour. That would be crazy. So I'm thinking maybe like a few different segments where I talk about some things that I think that just, some information that I want to share with you. And then, I'll post it, and then hopefully we can have some dialogue underneath the post, and we can, start having these important conversations. So as of 2018, 79% of all the teachers in the United States were white. This statistic has really not changed much over the years. Like every couple of years, it might drop a percentage point, but that's it. The overwhelming majority of teachers in the United States look like me. They're white, and there's a good chance that they're a woman. There's a reason for this. Before desegregation, when Black kids went to Black schools and white kids went to white schools, there were tons of Black teachers, tons of them. But when we integrated schools, we obviously didn't need all of those teachers, and the Black ones were the ones who got fired, because for a lot of white families, it was already bad enough that, we were going to put white kids in school with Black kids. They certainly weren't going to have a Black teacher teaching their white child. So, we had a huge percentage of Black people that were teachers, and then desegregation came, and that number dwindled to almost nothing. And, here we are today, still trying to recover from that situation. So because 79% of us are white, and it makes white people uncomfortable to talk about racism and white privilege and white supremacy, we have to start getting more comfortable. So we need to be having these conversations. So I thought I would start today by just sharing with you a little bit about me and my journey here. I grew up in South Jersey. I lived down at the shore, right outside of Ocean City, Sea Isle, Avalon. If you've ever been to any of those places, Stone Harbor, Cape May, that's where I'm from. I went to a really small Catholic school where everyone looked just like me. It was overwhelmingly white. I think in the 9 years that I was there, I could probably count on one hand the number of Black and brown kids that I knew in the whole building. And you knew everyone in the whole building because it was so small. Everyone looked like me. Because you paid tuition to go there, most of the families were middle class as well, because, you're paying for your kid to go to school. You have to have some money. That meant that a lot of my peers' parents were educated. Everyone looked like me. My dad is a lawyer. My mom was a police officer. My parents are very well educated, multiple degrees. I just came from a family where education was important, and we always had money for stuff. We were never poor. I never experienced anything like that. I just lived a very sheltered, comfortable life. We never talked about race, really. I knew that we weren't allowed to use the N-word, and I knew that people used that word, and I was not allowed to use that word. My parents were like, that's what low-class people call Black people, and that's not us, so we don't use that word. I knew that you shouldn't discriminate based on the color of somebody's skin, but I never had the opportunity to ever see that in front of me. I knew these things, but I never had to experience any of them because I just never knew anybody of color. They just weren't in my circle. So went to high school. I did go to a public high school. There were a few more kids of color there, but again, they were not in my circles. I knew that they were there, but I didn't really hang out with them. It wasn't really a big part of my life. I went to the University of Delaware for college. A lot more diversity there, but again, my circle never expanded. I didn't know people who didn't look like me in any intimate kind of way. I really didn't. If you had asked me at 21 if I was a racist, I'd be like, absolutely not. I don't use the N-word. I listen to rap music. I'm totally not a racist. And I really thought that was what we were supposed to do. I teach in a district. I've been teaching since I got my teaching degree. I've only ever worked in one district. And my district is different. I teach a lot of kids who don't look like me, who don't come from the kind of life that I led. And the first 3 years, I didn't think much of it. Colored wasn't something that I thought about. It wasn't something that I considered, or at least I didn't think that I did. And it wasn't until my first year of graduate school, I went to Stockton University to get my graduate degree, which is a school that's very close to where I live. My very, very first class there, it was like cultural literacy, and I think it was like a cultural literacy class. I forget the exact name of it, but anyway, the teacher comes in and she's a little white lady, and she's like the Magic School Bus lady. What's her name? Miss Fritz, Miss Fritz, whatever. But she's got this wild curly hair that she's got all tangled up in this messy bun, and she's got this long skirt on with her socks and her Birkenstock and this her Birkenstocks and this big baggy sweater. She just looks like this hippie kind of. She never lost the hippie days of the 60s. But anyway, she comes in and she's sort of like scattered and all over the place. And, I am like so excited and ready to be a graduate student. And I've got, my notebook and my pen, and I'm like so ready to just like learn all the things. But she just wasn't what I was expecting. Anyway, I don't remember exactly how the conversation got started, but she was talking about when we're making book recommendations to the kids in our class, how does the color of their skin influence the recommendations that we make? And I can remember being like, what? What are you talking about? Why would I ever look at their skin color to make a book recommendation? Like, what does their skin color have to do with it? Nothing. And I'm thinking in my head, I mean, I can remember this so well. I could even tell you what I was wearing. I can remember thinking like, this lady is a racist. This lady is trying to tell me that the book recommendations I make to my students should be influenced by the color of their skin. What is wrong with her? And she was asking a few different people, and when she got to me and she wanted me to answer this question, I mean, it is so cliche, it's almost embarrassing. But I looked right at her and I'm like, I'm sorry, but I don't see color in my students. Sorry, my dog's barking. I mean, seriously, that's what I said. That is as cliche as it comes. But yeah, I don't see color in my students. And she looked right at me and she goes, that is so sad for your students. Now, I couldn't tell you anything that was said through the rest of the class because I was seething. I was so angry. I was just like, my head was ready to explode. How could this woman, who is insinuating that I should be making book recommendations for my kids and considering the color of their skin before I make how is she going to tell me that that is sad for my students? That I was like shook. I remember leaving the class, calling my dad from the parking lot, because at 40 years old, I still call my parents first for everything. And I was like, this class was terrible. I hated it. I am dropping it. I'm going to pick another class. If they won't let me pick another class, I'm just going to drop out and I'll go to school somewhere else. Like, you will not even believe what this lady said. She's a racist and I'm not sitting in her class. I'm not. I mean, I was livid. I thought about it the whole ride home. I thought about it the whole next day. I mean, I could not stop thinking about it. And I don't know where the voice in my head came from. It may be divine intervention, even though I'm not really a religious kind of person, but whatever. But there was this little voice in my head that was like, don't drop this class. There might be something to learn here. And holy cow, thank God I didn't. Because what I learned in that class is probably some of the most important lessons I've ever learned in my entire life. And then I wound up taking 4 more classes with her throughout my entire, the entire like process of getting my master's degree. She's still a friend to this day. When I tell you, she's easily in the top 5 most influential people in my life. Like, she changed my life. She didn't just change me as a teacher. She changed me as a person. She blew my brain up. She blew up every single thing that I thought, believed in, rallied for, support. She broke it all down. And she made me rebuild it with eyes that were wide open, not eyes that were, super closed and could only see me and my circle. She made me see everything. I mean, to this day, I can't thank her enough for what she did for me, because she truly changed me as a person, not just as a teacher. In the years that I studied with her, I'm not going to say that they were easy. They were anything but. I mean, when you are finally forced to confront who you are inside and what you really believe, what you believe about race, what you believe about gender, what you believe about socioeconomic status, when you are forced to really like dig deep and stare those things in the face, you feel a lot of shame. You feel a lot of embarrassment. You feel sad. And when we feel those feelings, what I notice always, not just with myself, but when I talk to other people about this too, those feelings make us so uncomfortable that we immediately start to defend them. We start to try to justify them. We start to try to make sense, because we sit there and we think like, I can't really be like this, right? Like, I can't really be that kind of person who judges someone based on the color of their skin, can I? No, that can't possibly be me. And you start to defend yourself. And the more defensive you get, the angrier you get. And that's when the conversations shut down a lot of the times. And this is where I find white people especially turn themselves off and say, nope, can't do this. I can't do this. This is terrible. You're wrong and I'm right. And we're shutting this down. So, you know, I'm not going to pretend for a minute that the years that I spent with learning from her were easy. They were not. They were painful. It still is painful. I mean, every day I have an experience where I realize like, ooh, there's some bias. Ooh, there's some prejudice. Ooh, there's a stereotype I believe in. You know, so you're constantly noticing these things and you're constantly feeling ashamed and embarrassed, but that's where the growth comes. That's where, you know, the work is. So I'm not going to say that this is easy. It's not. It's uncomfortable, but we need to be uncomfortable to get to the place where we need to be to start fixing stuff. It's going to be uncomfortable, and that's really okay. So after my experience with graduate school, I really immersed myself in this. I decided that I just wanted to learn, and I realized real quick that I was going to have to go outside of my circle to learn, because my circle looks just like me. It is white, it is middle class. All of my best friends are very much like me. We are white, we grew up middle class, we're educated, we have similar beliefs, philosophies, we raise our kids the same way. Like, I knew I was going to need to really broaden my horizons. And so I started to read. I have like just a tiny fraction of books that I'm going to share with you today. There's just so many more I could recommend. But these were the ones that I happen to have here with me. I also started following a lot of different people on social media, looking for teachers who don't look anything like me, whose experience has been nothing like mine. I want to learn from them. They are the people I need to be listening to. They're the people you need to be listening to. So let me just start with some books. So the first book that I recommend to everyone is White Fragility, which is Robin DiAngelo's book. I do not have a copy of that with me right now because my dad is reading it, because we got in an argument the other night about rioting and looting and protesting, and he's going to read this book now, and I'm glad for that. So White Fragility is definitely where you should start. If you are a white teacher and you're like, okay, I'm ready to go on this journey, I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm doing it anyway, start with that book. And then I just have so many others to talk to you about. So this is a good one. Why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria, and other conversations about race? This is Beverly Daniel Tatum. This is important if you're a teacher. Well, these are important if you're anybody, but especially if you're a teacher. Another one to recommend. How to Be an Anti-Racist. This is Dr. Kendi. He is phenomenal. He's been speaking and speaking and speaking. I've seen him on so many different shows over this last week. He is phenomenal. How to Be an Anti-Racist. Check this one out. His other book, Stamped, is great too. I have the young adult version of Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. He took his book Stamped and he sort of, rewrote it with Jason Reynolds to make it more middle school friendly. This book talks about the history of racism in this country, and it is horrifying and fascinating. And I think that this book absolutely should be taught in every middle school in this country. Every single person needs to read this book. Every single kid. I think the world would be so incredibly different if they read this. The other one, I had talked about this one too a while ago. What is it called? Dark Sky Rising. Henry Louis Gates Jr. That is another fantastic book. Henry Louis Gates also wrote another book called Stony the Road, which I think is really, that's not for kids, it's for adults. I think not only do you want to be reading books that talk about racism today, but you want to be really understanding, you want to understand where it came from, how it started, obviously, when you think about the history of our country, the Black experience begins with them being enslaved, brought to this country, kidnapped to this country, and sold, and then only considered, not a full person. Clearly, that's where this stems from. But you have to understand, because so many people think like, oh, well, we freed the slaves, yay, we're even. That's not it at all. You need to really understand the history of how is it that we freed the slaves, but yet we're still here today. There's a lot to understand there, and I think that's important. So Henry Louis Gates Jr., definitely Dark Sky Rising, but Stony the Road. Read that one too. This is another great one. The Guide for White Women Who Teach Black Boys. This book is like an entire year of PD in and of itself. There is so much important information here, but then there's also like specific things you can be doing in your classroom every day. This is a lot to digest. This is a great PLC book. If you have PLCs, do a PLC with this book. You won't regret that. This book too, I think is important. Push Out, The Criminalization of Black Girls in School. This is Monique Morris. We did a PLC with this book last year. So when I first started this work and I first started to wake up a little bit to understanding my privilege and understanding how that affects me and understanding how that affects the relationship I have with my Black students, I really focused a lot on boys, which we tend to do because as white women, Black boys are as far opposite, as we can get. Like, at least like Black girls, I always thought like, well, you're a girl and I'm a girl, so we have that in common. So a lot of my focus was on my relationship with Black boys and trying to figure out how to, make those connections and bridge that gap between my world and theirs, and how can we do this. This book though made me realize that just because Black girls are girls and I'm a girl, there's a lot that I need to learn here. This book is so, I learned a lot in this one. I learned a lot. This book, I will say, more than any of them, fundamentally changed immediately the relationship with some of the kids in my room. Because as soon as I read this, I was able to identify how every day in schools, we sort of, push that narrative of, Black girls are loud and aggressive, and we consider them more mature than they are. We tend to think of them more as women and not children. Yeah, this book, definitely read this one. This book was eye-opening for sure. This is another helpful one. Not Light But Fire, How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom by Matthew R.K. This specifically talks about, how do you talk about race with your students? What do you do? We are, we're training these kids to grow up in a world where we want them to, work on ridding the world of racism. We need to be having conversations with our kids. This book talks about how to do that. This is another great one, Christopher Emdin. If you don't follow him on social media, you should. He's always got a lot of great stuff to say. For white folks who teach in the hood and the rest of y'all too. Reality, Pedagogy, and Urban Education. Everything he writes, I read. Every time he's speaking, I try to go see him. He's a great voice to listen to. This is not so much about school, but this is an incredibly powerful read because I think that as teachers, we have to understand what life looks like for our students after they leave us. You may have heard of that term, pipeline to prison, the idea that schools are not doing anything to prevent the mass incarceration of our kids of color. And this book talks about mass incarceration in the age of color blindness. This book is mind blown. And again, all stuff that if you as a white person who are surrounded by people who look just like you, who are, just living the same kind of life that you've always lived, whose circle is really small, these are conversations that you would never experience. These are ideas that you've probably never had to think about. So, you gotta read to find out. Class warfare is another good one. This talks specifically about class, but class and race are so intertwined in this country that I think it's important to study both. Inside the Fight to Fix America's Schools. This is Stephen Brill. Anytime that you can read something by Cornelius Minor, I think that's important. We got this. This is specifically a PD book for teachers, equity, access, and the quest to be who our students need us to be. This is a great one. Those are all the books that I have here with me at home. I have tons more at school and others that people have borrowed, but I feel like that's a good start. So yeah, what you want to be doing just to sort of get started is really start educating yourself. When I first started on this journey and I started to read these books, every single one of them was like, wow, I never realized this. I never saw it this way. I never thought about it this way. Your mind gets blown because these are things that you probably have never really given much thought to before. And so you need to start pushing yourself and thinking outside the box. I also recommend that you go follow people on social media. That's the beauty of social media. You can follow so many different people. I have really tried in the last year to strip down who I follow in social media, and I really am trying to stick with people. I want people that are so completely different than me. I want people whose lives look nothing like mine, because by understanding them and hearing what they have to say, it helps me understand my students better. So go find great people to follow. I'll list some people who I think are great underneath here. Go follow them. What you shouldn't do, however, is slip into their DMs later and say, oh, wow, I just found your page. I'm learning so much. I'm excited to do this work. Can you recommend for me a book, an article, something? You don't want to do that. So, because here's the thing, it's not the job of Black people to teach white teachers how to be better teachers to Black kids. That's not their job. You can do that. All the research is out there. All the work has been done. You can find it. It's not their job to teach you. It's not. So it's funny. I can remember when I first started this journey and following different people on social media. It was one of the things I would see all the time. It was like, listen, we're not here to do your work. You have Google, go Google it. And I remember thinking oh, well, you have all this information. Couldn't you just tell me something? But over the years since I started making more book recommendations, one of the things that happens to me all the time, and don't be upset if this is you, because I always, write back, but I have so many people that send me DMs and say, hey, I'm getting moved to 7th grade. Do you have any recommendations for good books I could read? Or do you have any recommendations for first chapter Fridays that I could do? Or do you have any recommendations that I could do for a whole class novel? And I'm like, it's all over my page. Like, go look. Like, I'm not going to sit here and type this all out for you. Like, go look on my page. They're everywhere. Not that I'm saying this is exactly the same thing, but it did make me start to realize like what that means by, Black teachers are not your resource, meaning it's not their job to educate you. They're doing all this work. You need to do the work too. Go look for yourself, scroll through their pages, Google stuff, find things. You know, it's not their job to just be answering direct messages all day long and basically answering the same question. So go follow different people, but don't then say, hey, this is great. I want to be like you. Can you tell me what to do? Don't do that. All right. So I think that's enough for this video. I think I gave you a lot of resources and just gave you some information about me that will hopefully make you, hopefully something I said resonated with you and you're like, oh, wow, that was kind of me too. Okay. I'm going to go on this journey. I'm going to give this a try, but I'll stop this video there and I'm going to post it and hopefully you guys will have some questions and then we can have some dialogue about this and then I'll put some other ones up. All right. I hope everybody is well, hanging in there. Have a good day.